For most of human history, the whole you only live once idea, it would have sounded, well, just plain weird. The default setting for humanity, for pretty much every ancient culture, was that life was a cycle. You come back. So how in the world did we go from seeing time as this big circle to a straight line? That's the incredible story we're going to dig into.
I mean, it's one of the biggest questions we can ask, right? Is this it? Is this life all there is? And a lot of us today would probably say, yeah, this is it. But that answer? It's surprisingly new. For thousands and thousands of years, across cultures that never even met each other, the answer was a resounding no. So this whole story really boils down to two big competing ideas. On one side, you've got the circle, this idea of renewal, of coming back, of having endless chances for your soul to learn and grow. And then on the other side, you've got the line. One chance, one final judgment, game over. For most of history, that circle was just how things were. So what happened? How did the line win? Okay, so to really get this shift, we have to kind of step back in time. We need to put ourselves in that older world, a world where life wasn't a straight path forward, but this huge, repeating cycle. Just like the seasons coming and going, or the moon waxing and waning. It was that natural. And look, this wasn't some fringe, mystical belief for a select few. No way. This was the foundation of reality. People in ancient times looked at the world around them. They saw a seed sprout, grow, die, and then return its life to the soil. And they saw themselves in that. It was a mirror for their own spiritual journey. Rebirth was, in a very real way, the language of the universe. All right, let's do a quick trip around the world because you have to see just how widespread and honestly how beautifully different these beliefs were. It's actually staggering when you see it all together. So first up, ancient India. Here, the soul was seen as part of this unending rhythm. This is where we get the concept of karma, the idea that every single action matters because it shapes your future lives. But, and this is key, it wasn't really about punishment. It was more like an education, a chance for the soul to learn and evolve over countless lifetimes. And that core idea, born thousands of years ago, is still a massive part of several major world religions today. And the name for this whole cycle is samsara. Think of it as this great spinning wheel of existence in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. And the goal? Well, it isn't just to have a better next life. The ultimate goal is to understand the whole system so well that you can actually step off the wheel entirely. It's all about the journey of learning, not just landing in one final spot. Okay, now let's head west to ancient Egypt. It's a different kind of cycle, but a cycle nonetheless. So after you die, your soul goes on this journey through the underworld, the duat. And then comes the big moment. Picture this. Your heart is put on a scale and weighed against a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, which stands for truth and cosmic balance. If your heart was light, not weighed down by bad deeds, you were granted eternal life in this paradise called the Field of Reeds. So it's a cycle, but one that involves judgment leading to renewal. Now jump over to Mesoamerica. The Maya and the Mexica, who you might know as the Aztecs, they had a totally different take. For them, rebirth wasn't about moral lessons. It was all about the flow of cosmic energy. Life and death were in this constant dynamic exchange. And here's a really cool example. They believed that warriors who died in battle were reborn as hummingbirds, these tiny, super energetic symbols of the sun itself, making its journey across the sky every day. How amazing is that? Even the ancient Greeks were in on this, especially certain philosophical schools like the Orphics and Pythagoreans. They thought the soul was kind of trapped in this cycle of reincarnation until it became purified through wisdom. And for them, the key to it all was memory. There were two symbolic rivers, the river of Lethe, which made you forget everything, and the river of Mnemosyne, which let you remember who you truly are, your divine origin. And over in Celtic Europe, the Druids had a really beautiful way of looking at it. They saw life not just as a circle, but as a spiral. So yeah, the soul comes back, but each time it's on a slightly different level, building on what came before. They believed souls were immortal and would often come back to their own families to, finish what they started. Death wasn't the end. It was just the next turn on this ever upward spiral. So you see the pattern, right? This idea of a cycle was the global norm. Seriously, from India to Ireland, Egypt to the Americas, people saw themselves as part of this endless story of return, which really makes you stop and think. If this was the default setting for humanity for thousands of years, what on earth was powerful enough to take that circle and stretch it out into a straight line?
Well, the first big shift seems to pop up in ancient Persia with a religion called Zoroastrianism. And this was a game changer. It introduced a totally new structure for time, a clear beginning, a massive struggle between good and evil, and a final one-and-done ending. This was a radical idea compared to the endless cycles, and it really planted the seeds for the linear way we think about time and history today. And this chart, it just lays it all out so clearly. You can see the pattern of decline. Just look at the timelines. As these big new empires and singular belief systems started to expand, those older cyclical worldviews, they just started to fade away. Sometimes it was through conquest, like what happened in Mesoamerica. Other times it was gradual conversion, like in Celtic and Norse Europe. But either way, one by one, the lines started to win out over the circle. So you gotta ask, why was this linear idea so successful? This quote really hits the nail on the head. Think about it. A story with one beginning, one set of rules you have to follow in your one life, and then one final judgment. That is an incredibly useful tool if you're trying to build a big empire or a powerful institution. It creates a really clear system of reward and punishment, and it puts all the authority in one central place. So let's dive a little deeper into how this new linear path really took hold, because the consequences of this change were, well, they were massive. This wasn't just a change in religious ideas. It fundamentally rewired how humans experienced life itself. Let's just break down that chain reaction. It kind of goes like this. First, growing empires needed order, and a single linear story provides the perfect framework for that. Second, that story helps centralize power in the hands of institutions who say they're in charge of that final judgment. So then the whole goal of life changes. It's no longer about slow personal growth over many lives. It becomes about obedience in this life. And that leads to the final step. That old, comfortable sense of endless continuity gets replaced by this intense new urgency. Suddenly, you've only got one shot to get it right. And this is really the key takeaway from all of this. The shift from a circle to a line wasn't just some abstract theological debate. It was a deep psychological rewiring for humanity. We went from feeling like we were in an eternal flowing river to feeling like we were standing on a single tiny river gank, just watching it all rush past us for a brief moment. But here's where it gets really interesting. Even after the straight line became the main story in so much of the world, that old circle, that spiral, it never really went away. It didn't disappear. It just kind of went underground. Which brings us to the big final question, doesn't it? After all this history, after these massive changes in how we see the world, is that ancient, cyclical way of thinking really lost for good? The answer? Absolutely not. Not at all. It's still alive and well in the beliefs of hundreds of millions of people who follow Eastern religions. It lives on in our folklore, in our myths about heroes who die and come back. We see it literally every single year with the turning of the seasons. And maybe most importantly, we feel it inside ourselves, that deep human desire for a second chance, for a do-over, for the chance to just begin again. And maybe that's the perfect thought to leave you with. This ancient idea, it's not just some dusty old relic from a history book. It's a persistent, patient way of seeing the world. A spiral. And it's always there to remind us that maybe, just maybe, every end is just another kind of beginning, patiently waiting for us to remember.